Introducing Korean broadcast content that you won't be able to stop watching. For weary modern souls, Dr. Romantic, the quirky genius doctor of Puldam Hospital, prescribes heartwarming tales of humanity. A couple together for 7 years sees their rose-tinted glasses shatter. Can they keep their relationship alive? Discover the raw stories of youth, work, and love. Beyond what social media can show, experience the vibrant Korea through its hidden gems. Mama, the ultimate K-pop festival for global fans. Find your star in a feast of trendy music and electrifying performances. Now, the whole world enjoys it together.
President Lee Jae-myung is on a state visit to China and is set to hold a summit with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping in Beijing this afternoon. They're expected to discuss a range of bilateral issues, including North Korea and economic cooperation. South Korea's military said North Korea launched ballistic missiles toward the East Sea on Sunday. The North claimed this morning that the launch was a successful test of its hypersonic missiles and that leader Kim Jong-un was in attendance. Venezuela's leader, Nicolas Maduro, who was captured during a U.S. military operation, is set to appear before a court in New York on Monday. Addressing questions over the lack of congressional approval for the operation, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio defended the move, saying it was a law enforcement arrest, not an invasion. Hello and thanks for joining us on Arirang News. We begin today with President Lee Jae-myung's state visit to China, where the leaders of Seoul and Beijing are set to sit down for talks this afternoon. The agenda is expected to cover a range of issues with a focus on the economy and North Korea. Our Blue House correspondent Yoon Jang-min reports from Beijing.
President Lee Jae-myung landed in Beijing on Sunday for his 4-day state visit. His meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping is scheduled for Monday, about 2 months after they met in South Korea. High on the agenda is restoring the Seoul-Beijing relationship, which had been frosty under the previous administration. In an interview with China's CCTV ahead of his trip, President Lee noted that while security cooperation with the U.S. was unavoidable, Seoul-Beijing relations should not head towards confrontation. The leaders are also expected to focus on economic cooperation, centered on supply chains, investment, and the digital economy, with a signing event planned for a number of MOUs. Discussions are also expected on jointly tackling transnational online scam crimes.
The leaders will discuss ways to achieve tangible results that can substantially contribute to the lives of the people in both countries.
North Korea is also on the summit agenda, as Seoul asks Beijing to play a constructive role to revive dialogue with Pyongyang.
Both South Korea and China share the common goal of peace and stability on the Korean peninsula and in Northeast Asia.
Eyes are also on China potentially lifting its unofficial ban on Korean cultural content that began in 2016. Sensitive issues could also be included, such as China's unauthorized steel structures in the West Sea. When it comes to Taiwan issues, President Lee said in an interview ahead of his trip that South Korea will continue to respect the One China policy. Blue House officials say it's unprecedented to have completed South Korea-China reciprocal visits at the top level in just 2 months.
With the summit taking place amid complicated geopolitics, attention is on President Lee's pragmatic diplomacy and balanced approach, and what it means for the region. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News, Beijing.
And upon arriving in Beijing, President Lee also had dinner with members of the local Korean community on Sunday. In his opening remarks, Lee said restoring relations with Beijing had been his most significant diplomatic achievement since taking office, after ties had faced strains in recent years. The trip marks the fastest reciprocal state visit between the leaders of South Korea and China, following Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit to Gyeongju last year. He expressed hope that his visit would serve as a new starting point for further advancing bilateral relations. The president also pledged to improve overseas voting access for South Korean nationals living in China, noting that there are just 10 polling stations nationwide. And on the economic front, South Korea's benchmark KOSPI passed 4,400 during the trade on Monday, briefly jumping over 2% after the market opened. The surge was driven by gains for mega-cap tech stocks, including Samsung Electronics and SK hynix. Watchers say investors are focusing on Samsung Electronics' earnings announcement on Thursday and the upcoming IT and home appliance exhibition, CES 2026, on Tuesday. Shares of Samsung Electronics and SK hynix hit the 130,000 Korean won mark and 700,000 won respectively for the first time on Monday. And with the start of the new year, leaders from business, government, and politics laid out their vision for the year ahead at the country's largest annual economic gathering. Our Moon Hae-ryun has the details.
South Korea's top business leaders, government officials, and lawmakers gathered Friday to reaffirm their commitment to reviving the nation's economy amid mounting global and domestic uncertainty. Marking its 64th year as the country's largest annual economic gathering, the 2026 Economic Leaders New Year reception at the Korea Chamber of Commerce and Industry headquarters in Central Seoul brought together around 500 business leaders alongside the Prime Minister, political parties, and government ministers. This year's event was held under the slogan "Growing Businesses, a Rising Korea," as participants pledged closer cooperation between the private sector, government, and the National Assembly to drive economic recovery. Opening the event, KCCI Chairman Cha Tae-won, who also heads SK Group, warned that South Korea is approaching a critical crossroads.
2026 may be one of the most important years for Korea. We are nearing the final moment to decide whether we fall into negative growth or create a new era of growth.
Cha stressed the urgency of preparing for the artificial intelligence era, calling for expanded startup ecosystems, early infrastructure investment, and policies focused squarely on growth. Government leaders echoed that message. Prime Minister Kim Min-seok, who delivered a congratulatory address, emphasized the importance of public-private cooperation to navigate economic headwinds, including exchange rate volatility and global policy uncertainty. Business leaders also highlighted opportunities despite global challenges. Liu Jin, chairman of the Federation of Korean Industries, pointed to the transformative impact of emerging technologies.
The AI revolution is fundamentally reshaping the global economic order. Korea must seize this moment to open a new era of K-industry through a major economic transformation.
Meanwhile, the head of the Korea International Trade Association noted that Korea achieved a historic milestone last year, surpassing $700 billion in exports for the first time. Participants concluded the event by pledging to move forward with strength and momentum in the new year, as they seek to steer the Korean economy towards renewed growth in an increasingly competitive global landscape. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
North Korea has fired hypersonic missiles into the East Sea, with regime leader Kim Jong-un overseeing the exercise. Now, this marks Pyongyang's first missile launch this year and comes amid heightened global tensions and President Lee Jae-myung's trip to Beijing. Our Park Junan has the latest.
North Korea on Sunday fired hypersonic missiles toward the East Sea, with its leader Kim Jong-un personally overseeing the exercise. This was confirmed by South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff and North Korea's state-run Korean Central News Agency. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said multiple missiles fired from near Pyongyang at around 7:50 a.m. Sunday were detected. The projectiles traveled approximately 900 to 950 kilometers before falling into the East Sea between Russia and Japan, with Japan's Ministry of Defense reporting 2 ballistic missiles. The U.S. Indo-Pacific Command also acknowledged the launch, saying it posed no immediate threat to U.S. personal territory or allies, while reaffirming Washington's commitment to defending the homeland and regional partners. Korean Central News Agency on Monday described the event as a hypersonic missile launch training exercise aimed at evaluating the readiness of its hypersonic weapon systems and verifying operational capabilities. Kim Jong-un, who attended the launch, praised the exercise, saying that the readiness and lethality of Pyongyang's strategic offensive capabilities are an effective means of deterrence. The timing of the North's missile launches coincides with South Korean President Lee Jae-myung's departure for China and follows the capture of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro by the U.S. Experts suggest the timing was carefully calculated to reflect Pyongyang's claim that, unlike Venezuela, it possesses nuclear and missile capabilities strong enough to deter potential U.S. intervention. Sunday's missile launch marks North Korea's first ballistic missile launch since November last year. This is also the third since the start of the Lee Jae-myung administration. Park Junan, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, China has sharply increased the enforcement of export controls as the U.S.-China trade war escalates. According to data released by the Korean Security Agency of Trade and Industry on Monday, administrative penalties related to export control violations in China jumped more than 70% in the first half of 2025, with 79 cases recorded, up from 46 the year before. Beijing has expanded controls on strategic minerals, recently adding silver to export licensing requirements, and has tightened rare earth export restrictions on the U.S. Plans to require licenses for products containing Chinese rare earth materials were postponed for 1 year, following last October's U.S.-China Leaders Summit in Gyeongju, easing immediate global supply chain concerns. Meanwhile, the United States captured Venezuela's leader, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife during a raid on Friday night. The Venezuelan leader was flown to New York, where he's set to appear before a court on Monday. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
The United States carried out a ground operation in Venezuela on Saturday, resulting in the capture of President Nicolas Maduro and his transport to the U.S. to face federal charges. The operation took place following heightened pressure from Washington after U.S. President Donald Trump declared a renewed war on drugs. According to U.S. officials, Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, were captured in a middle-of-the-night raid and transported aboard a U.S. warship. They arrived in New York on Saturday evening and are currently being held at the Metropolitan Detention Center. U.S. prosecutors have charged the couple with narco-terrorism conspiracy, alleging involvement in large-scale drug trafficking and cooperation with criminal gangs designated by Washington as terrorist organizations. Maduro has denied all accusations. A spokesperson for the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York said both defendants are scheduled to appear in federal court at noon on Monday. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio defended the operation on Sunday, saying congressional authorization was not required. Speaking on ABC News, Rubio described the mission as a law enforcement action rather than a military invasion.
It wasn't necessary because this is not an invasion. We didn't occupy a country. This was an arrest operation. This was a law enforcement operation. He was arrested on the ground in Venezuela by FBI agents, read his rights, and removed from the country.
Meanwhile, Venezuela's Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino said a significant portion of Maduro's security team was killed during the raid. though he did not provide casualty figures. He announced that Vice President Delcy Rodriguez has been declared interim president and that the armed forces have been mobilized nationwide to maintain sovereignty. 이승재, Arirang News.
Now on the cultural front, after a blockbuster year for K-pop last year, 2026 is shaping up to be another exciting comeback season, with the return of big names like BTS and BLACKPINK. Our Park Won-woo has this report.
K-pop fans, get ready. Phenomenal boy band BTS has officially announced a March 20th comeback, revealed on the very first day of the new year.
여러분 새해 복 많이 받으시고요. 올해 뵙겠습니다.
The release will mark BTS's first album in nearly 4 years, following the completion of military service by all 7 members. Details on the album's concept or a potential world tour are expected later this year. Expectations are already running high as their 2022 track Run BTS from their latest album topped the iTunes chart in more than 60 countries. But BTS isn't the only act making waves. BLACKPINK's dropping a first full-length album in 4 years, following last summer's single Jump. BIGBANG is also gearing up for a comeback, marking 20 years since debuting, while EXO is set to drop a new full-length album in mid-January. As these so-called second and third generation K-pop groups return, questions remain over whether they can recapture the spotlight they once held. One expert said fan power will be the key.
The fandom has become much stronger than before, so even when groups make a comeback after a long break, the role of their fans is clearly important. What matters most is whether artists show what their fans want to see as K-pop. More than other genres, is fan-centered. So, it's better not to be overly innovative or focus on agency profits.
He added that collaborations could help veteran groups reach a second peak, citing twice participating in the K-pop Demon Hunters project as a successful example. He also noted that working with younger generation artists could help sustain and expand their musical careers. While some analysis show a global decline in K-pop album sales compared to 2024, the same expert says it's not a major concern.
Album sales aren't the only metric to look at. The decline was partly due to major groups postponing their comebacks. Globally, overall consumption is shrinking. It's not just happening in Korea. At the same time, concert sales have reached record highs, and I believe this positive trend will continue into next year.
Although groups like BTS and BLACKPINK still lead the global K-pop scene, he said it's time for that leadership to be passed on, with more active participation from rookies and artists from small to mid-sized agencies. Park Won-woo, Arirang News.
Ahn Sung-ki, one of South Korea's most beloved actors who had been battling blood cancer, died on Monday at the age of 74. Ahn had been receiving treatment in an intensive care unit of a hospital in Seoul for about a week after collapsing while choking on food at his home last Tuesday. He was diagnosed with blood cancer in 2019 and was declared cancer-free a year later, but the disease later recurred, and he had been undergoing treatment until recently. After making his debut in 1957, Ahn appeared in around 140 films over his career, including 실미도 and Two Cops. He was widely known for his warm public image and decades-long contributions to Korean cinema.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, on Saturday signaled a tougher crackdown as a week of protests over the country's ailing economy shook Iran. In his remarks, he drew a line between protesters angry over the rial's collapse and what he called rioters, saying they must be put in their place. Human rights activists say at least 15 people have been killed and more than 580 protesters are currently behind bars. U.S. President Donald Trump warned Iran on Friday that if it violently kills peaceful protesters, the United States will come to their rescue, prompting Iranian officials to threaten U.S. troops in the region. An armed gang in northern Nigeria has slaughtered at least 30 people and abducted dozens more after attacking a crowded village market. Gunmen on motorcycles descended on Kasua Daji village in Niger State on Saturday evening, opening fire indiscriminately on shoppers and traders. The attackers razed to the ground several homes and the market during a 3-hour rampage before retreating into the forest. Local Catholic Church officials warn the actual death toll likely exceeds 40, with many children among the missing. In Syria, the UK and France have carried out a joint strike on a major Islamic State underground weapons cache. Royal Air Force Typhoons and French aircraft launched precision airstrikes on Saturday night, targeting a network of tunnels in the mountain north of Palmyra. Intelligence confirmed the facility stored high-grade explosives intended for a jihadist resurgence. IS reportedly has around 7,000 fighters remaining in the region. UK Defense Secretary John Healey said the strikes eliminated the threat without civilian casualties, asserting that the coalition will not allow the terror group to rebuild its violent caliphate. In Las Vegas, CES 2026 kicks off this Tuesday, January 6th, showcasing the next generation of intelligent machines. Organizers of the Consumer Electronics Show expect more than 4,500 exhibitors, including 1,400 startups, and the show is set to showcase artificial intelligence across consumer tech, alongside a heavy focus on robotics and humanoid robots. Major brands slated to appear include NVIDIA, AMD, Lenovo, Hyundai, and Samsung. Las Vegas tourism officials said CES brings roughly 140,000 visitors and about $380 million in economic impact, with airlines adding 360 flights for the event. Chu Ji-han, Arirang News.
I'm sure many are coming back to work after a long end-of-year holiday break, but there's no severe cold to worry about, despite today marking Sohan, one of the coldest days of winter on the seasonal calendar. However, this afternoon will be colder than Sunday, with temperatures hovering right around the seasonal norms. And from this afternoon, skies will gradually clear nationwide, but the air will become even drier. Dry weather alerts are already issued in parts of Seoul and much of the eastern regions, with a dry weather warning along the east coast. So please, small spark could lead to a large fire. Extra caution is essential. This afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to 2 degrees. Gwangju, Daegu both topping out at 6 degrees Celsius under bright skies nationwide with decent air quality. Now, those in Jeju will have frequent winter mix this week. And after that, between Friday and Saturday, the central regions will be seeing another round of winter rain or snowfall.
That's all we have for today's noon edition of Arirang News. Thank you for watching. We'll be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Stay tuned.